Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is really an honor to be given this opportunity to address you in such an important occasion. It is always refreshing and encouraging to speak to like-minded people. Hannah just mentioned the increase of the price of mobile money transaction costs, and Ghana just passed our e-levy, so we are waiting to see what that impact would be. But before I give my address, I would like to say just a few words on the Financial Inclusion Forum, which I chair. The forum was set up in 2016, and the whole idea is to bring people who are passionate about financial inclusion across Africa, together. Since then, we've had about 30 odd events and bringing lots of people together. We've done, most of our events have been in Ghana, but we've also done some in other countries as well. We are made up of people who work in banks, telcos, fintechs, academics, finance, researchers, and I'm sure many of those in the audience would have joined some of our events. If you haven't, then please join us. Follow us on social media. We have our much anticipated Mobile Technology for Development Conference, which is an annual conference, for this year, coming on in the middle of the year, and more information will be provided. I'm also the Global Director for Digital Financial Services at Opportunity International, one of the pioneers of global microfinance networks. They've done a lot of work on savings and trust groups and SUSU. I know my colleagues are in the audience, and I'm sure they will share their experiences as well. But I'm particularly happy today because it's the first time this year after the COVID years that we are having a face-to-face or a full face-to-face event. Though I'm not with you, nowadays working remotely and joining remotely and virtually has become part of our lives. So I'm speaking to you from a wintry day in the UK. But I also thank the MasterCard Foundation for providing the funding and also, the thought of coming up with such a program, and for OPM and SATIF itself for delivering such a program and allowing us Financial Inclusion Forum to co-host. So we thank you very much. Now, for those of us who have been following developments in the informal savings mechanism sector, the Savings at the Frontier project was very welcome. And we have been waiting in anticipation for the results. I remember meeting Steve many years ago and talking about this. So it's such a great honor that we've been asked to be part of it and for us to share in the exciting findings. And I know that there will be lots of discussions, and I really wish I would have been there in person to learn from what has gone on. But before that, I just want to share my few thoughts on savings mechanisms as I've experienced it through my career. So I remember the very first group that I visited, and that was in 2006 in a village called Katine in Uganda. It was an internally displaced camp where people who had fled some fighting caused by the Lord's Resistance Army, and they had settled in Katine. And the women I met had formed a group to raise money to pay for school fees for the children that had been left at orphans during the conflict. And I remember watching in amazement at how they conducted their meetings, recorded transactions, and put money in this old tin box. But to be honest, the feelings I had were really mixed. I was sad to see how desperate their situation was. I was also angry that, these women had to sit under a tree in the hot sun and put money in a box, because no financial institution was willing to serve them. At that time, I was working for Barclays, Yet I was also encouraged at the energy they had and the fact that they were willing to do something about their situation. So over the past 15 years or so since then, I've visited many savings groups, urban, rural, across Africa. And every time I visit one, the same three emotions flare up: the sadness, the anger, the encouragement. And I always ask myself why, why do our mothers and sisters have to sit under a tree just to do their banking, when you and I don't do that? With the SUSU system, it's similar. We started, I was at Barclays, this is about 2005. We started our first linkage with the SUSU system Today, the system has greatly improved. And, this is always pre-digital time, so it was always tougher. And but the same questions arise. How can we improve the system for those who are using it so that it really transforms their lives? For many people in the rural areas, coming together in groups is extremely important for community life. It is therefore not surprising that people should gather to manage their finances. Traditionally, saving group mechanisms have been formed precisely because formal financial services have not been able to meet their needs. Their very structure and makeup is to get people to provide their own financial needs, relying on their own community knowledge and dynamics. So why should we link them to formal services? And what is the role of financial services in this, and what do we stand to gain? And these are questions that have always come up every time we've talked about, formalization and working with informal systems. Since I've been a banker for so many years, I will look at it from the supply side and share some of my thoughts. One of the big attractions, and Steve mentioned it, for a bank to link with savings groups in particular, and also with Susu collectors, is the idea that we can reach large numbers of people with lower acquisition costs. So if we can go to a group and sign up 20 people, hey, that would be great. The deposits as well. There are many reports that talk of these large amounts of money that are sitting in these metal boxes or wooden boxes or under people's beds in rural locations. And, how can banks get access to that deposit? But many of you would know, those who have worked with informal systems, know that it's not that simple and it's not that straightforward to bank so many people that way and to get the money. With digitization, we believe that linkages can be a bit more sustainable in the sense that the cost of reaching these large numbers of people and deposits can be substantially lower. But back in the mid-2000s, linkages was a challenge because the money in these boxes somehow had to get to a branch that was miles away. So somehow the mechanics didn't quite work. There was no agency banking or mobile money at that time. But ladies and gentlemen, so linking groups to, or digitizing them for that matter, should be more than scale and deposits. And we should ask ourselves many questions, to make this happen. First, for me, is what problem and whose problem are we actually trying to solve here? As for financial service operators from the supply side, this to me is one of the very basic questions that we need to ask. And I think Steve mentioned it, alluded to this fact. Is it because you want the cheap deposits? Or is it because there's some donor funding that you want to have access to? Then what happens if the funding runs out? Or is it a CSR project that makes you look good? Or is it that you actually want to solve the challenges that the members face? Or do you see a potentially profitable segment and an opportunity to really change lives? And senior management or senior leadership need to answer these questions truthfully. See, because when the going gets tough, and trust me, the difficult decisions will come, that's when we find those who really want to do this. It's either you stop or you find new ways of going about the challenge. And I remember when we were linking saving groups whilst at Fidelity, we went all the way to Garu in the north to go and link groups. We got all our salespeople together. We had to hire a car because obviously no car, public transport was going there. So we hired a 4x4, put them in, got there. It had rained, roads were blocked, nobody turned up. And so we had to turn back, And you are sitting there as a manager and you wonder, with all the costs that you put in to get to that point, do you actually go again when the rain stops? So for me, the reason why you are doing this should be important for senior leadership. Someone once told me that microfinance or providing financial services for the poor is about a tension between doing well and doing good. And that tension is real for anybody who wants to do financial inclusion. And there is that tension. And if you don't feel that tension, then you are either, like an NGO providing free, or you are all the way too commercial, in which case you will not do it because the challenges are real. And that tension has to be felt within leadership if you want to do this successfully. The next thing I want to speak about is about designing solutions. And this is why I'm really excited about the projects that you hear about today. I've had the privilege of working with some of them, and I'm truly impressed with their solutions. And I'm sure you will hear more from them. But just to offer a few thoughts here. To offer individual accounts to group members, we need to consider how members of the savings groups manage their money. I visited VSLA a few years ago, and we had provided a group account, but also individual accounts. And one lady came and said, a tree had fallen on her farm. She burnt it for charcoal. She got 50 Ghana. And she couldn't put the 50 Ghana in the VSLA or the savings group, because the amounts were limited. She could put only 5 Ghana per share, So, what does she do with the excess? But because she had an individual account, she was able to put money into that account. So it seems to me that people use these accounts differently, and the transaction or the movement of money from an individual account to a group account may not be that high. And I think I read some reports from SATIF to sort of confirm that. So, we need to consider how the group actually functions, if you're going to provide these individual accounts to them or provide accounts to them as a whole. We need to consider maybe the nature of the group or what the group does over time would change as people get wealthier and they have individual accounts. After all, you and I don't necessarily bank in groups. We have our individual accounts. It doesn't stop people from still meeting, but perhaps the groups can provide the same joint collateral needed for people to get individual loans or offer financial literacy, education advice, and other aspects. But the idea of coming to the group purposely of just pushing money into a box or into some kind of account, maybe those will transform. But also banks also need to look at the product that they offer groups and also collectors or the system as a whole to encourage them to bank with them. Interest rates, as Hannah mentioned, will have to be attractive enough if you want them to put their deposit with you, because for a typical group, well, they can make more money if they lend the money out to themselves. So, you've got to look at that. It's not just cheap deposits coming to you. But I think more importantly is to understand the dynamics between the individual and the group. We have to look at it as some kind of a holistic or comprehensive solution. Rather than I'm going to give you a product just to do this. And I think Steve mentioned the idea of savings and savings. And I think that's it's very important that you look at it more holistically and comprehensively. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a way I believe that if we think about providing a solution would help. Last for me is partnership. So providing financial services to the poor is not an easy task. For me, it's even tougher than rocket science, because the solutions that we think about and come up with are a matter of life and death for many people, and we cannot do it alone, because the end result of financial inclusion is not just providing an account for somebody, it's actually ensuring that that person's life is improved, and that's not easy. And as you see, all the solutions here are partnerships between donors, FSPs, fintechs, regulators, researchers, policymakers, and they all have an important role to play. And I understand that across all the 3 countries, they have some 67,000 individual accounts, which is not bad. And you can imagine what would happen if more partnerships were formed, new ideas exchanged, and more learning sort of discussed. So to end here, I will just call on all here, the bankers, regulators, fintechs, policymakers, researchers, that this is out to make a difference in people's lives. Savings mechanisms have helped people when informal services were not ready. Today, the ball is in our hands. We have new tools, we have better knowledge and possibility and possibly sort of greater passion. In the late early 2000s, financial inclusion was not even a common term that you would hear in Africa. Today it's everywhere, and we have new terms: digital finance, digital health, have all become common terms that we use today. The fact that you are sitting here alone shows some dedication and passion in bringing the magic of finance to poor people. So I challenge us all to take the learnings of SATIF and the learning that SATIF presents and let us use it to make a difference in people's lives. I know that we can, and I'm really happy that it's being presented to us in the form that it has. So thank you once again for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the deliberations and discussions. Thank you.